So the poem that is listed in your order of service, I am going to read that for our closing words because I found a different poem that I wanted to read. And this one is called The Low Road by Marge Piercy. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up, they can bust you, they can break your fingers, they can burn your brain with electricity, blur you with drugs till you can't remember, can't walk. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't stop them from doing. How can you stop them? Alone, you can fight, you can refuse, you can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a committee, a wedge. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on, one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they said no. It starts when you say we, and you know who you mean, and each day you mean one more. General Assembly. It is such an unassuming name for something so enormous. If you don't know, it is the annual assembly of all the Unitarian Universalist congregations in the United States, where everyone gathers together into one community for a span of about 4 or 5 days. Every year, there is a different theme focused on what feels most present to our larger UU community. What is the topic that everyone seems to be wrestling with? We spend the 5 days in discussion and in workshops and worship, ultimately voting on the issues that will define our faith for the year or even the next 10 years and beyond. You may know all this, but I want to catch everybody up because there are likely folks in this sanctuary that don't know. And in telling you all about GA, I'm modeling a little bit of what this sermon is about. The power of we, and when we say we, meaning everyone. In this case, it is the people who know what General Assembly is and the people who don't. Acknowledging that though some of us may have just walked into a UU fellowship for the very first time this morning, and some of us might be second or even third generation UUs, we all belong. We all deserve to be acknowledged and included. This year's General Assembly was all about the power behind acknowledging and making space for the diversity of experience that is Unitarian Universalism and the beloved community of multi-faith, multiculture, multi-gender, multi-ability that we seek to build. The president of our Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations is Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, and she gave the sermon at opening worship this year on the first evening of the assembly. And in her sermon, she talked about our chalice, the symbol of Unitarian Universalism, the cup and the flame. And she said that the flame is the light that draws us all to this faith, our theology of love and our principles of justice, And we hold that light up, and we say everyone is welcome to it. It belongs to us all equally, no matter who we are, who we love, where we come from. But she cautioned us not to neglect the cup. The cup is the community. In the cup is where it gets real, where we come face to face with our best and worst selves. We hold up that flame, what we strive for, but we also contend with the reality of who we are. Human, flawed, and imperfect, trying again and again each day to love one another, to witness to one another, and be with one another just as we are. But I want to add that in my mind, the flame is not just up there, like a beacon, some external perfection. I believe it is also inside of us. We each carry that light within. Each person has a piece of it. And our Universalism says that no matter what we do or what is done to us, how imperfect or flawed the world might be or we might be, nothing can touch that light. It can't be extinguished. It can't be harmed. It's our inherent worthiness and our connection to the holy. When I was in seminary, I began a spiritual practice of going out into the world and trying to see that light in everyone I encountered, to walk through the grocery store or drive along in traffic and attempt to witness each person as a unique expression of the divine and worthy of my respect. It was a practice of staying present, looking for that flame in everyone. This is not easy, you can imagine. I got frustrated by people, and then I got frustrated that they frustrated me and threw me off my practice. Why couldn't they just be nice to me so I could see them as holy? Pulling out in front of me in their cars, not waiting their turn in line, essentially not playing by my rules of basic kindness. And I kept having to remind myself just to stay calm. We're all just human. And these people are just being human really close to me. This is why I'm a Unitarian Universalist, because I need to be reminded to do better, to forgive more, to love more. This is our place to practice being human close to one another, so we can go out into the world with more understanding and patience. We practice here, tending to the cup of our community, holding up our lights, and then we take it out into the larger world where we share love and acceptance with those folks as well. This develops what Susan Frederick Gray calls our capacity for community, our capacity for love and justice, our capacity for joy and vulnerability. To be a community that can nurture such a light as the flame of our chalice, a light of divinity that shines inside all of us, this is a love that can change the world. In order to nurture such a light, we need to develop the capacity first. And it starts with the low road. What can they do to you? When I hear this question, I feel called to tell you what is on my heart today. Last night, there was a vigil in Poulsbo to honor the life of Stone Child Chiefstick, an Indigenous man who was shot by police officers who fired into a crowd during the July 3rd celebration in Poulsbo. The eyewitness accounts of what happened are not consistent, but all of them are deeply troubling. Stony, as he was known to friends and family, was a member of the Chippewa Cree tribe in Montana, but he and his family have deep ties to the Suquamish tribe and have lived and worked in Suquamish for a long time. Last night at the vigil, Stoney's family and friends spoke of his smile, his sense of humor, his laughter, the way he always wore his cap at an angle. They spoke of his struggles with addiction, but they also spoke of his heart, a heart filled with love, and a man who did not deserve such a death. There is an investigation pending, and in the meantime, the community of Suquamish is in deep mourning. And many in this room, I'm sure you as well when you hear this story, are in grief over this as well. This is a community tragedy, and one that we all hold together. And I invite you to keep his family in your thoughts as we all pray for their healing at this time. What can they do to you? Whatever they want. How can you stop them? In Marge Piercy's poem, she outlines a lot of ways we can stop them. In greater and greater numbers, she gives us the answer. Together, we can keep each other sane. We can give each other hope. We can create a delegation, start an organization. We can hold a fundraiser, make a demonstration, fill a hall, and it goes on. And she doesn't leave out the joy of community, which includes having sex, playing bridge, and eating pie for dinner with no seconds. It starts just like this, in big and small ways, in justice and in love. When we say we, and we know who we mean, and each time we mean one more. This is the call of General Assembly this year. The power of we begins with each time meaning one more. How might we, ourselves in our individual lives, but also in our families and in this congregation, how might we expand our idea of we so that we can include one more? This year at General Assembly, the question of who we are was a potent one, in part because of the distribution of a book written and self-published by UU minister Reverend Todd Eckloff. This book calls out Unitarian Universalism with thinly veiled racism, explaining to its reader who it thinks the we of Unitarian Universalism should be. And its definition doesn't include everyone. It excludes people, by name in some cases, and says that their version of Unitarian Universalism doesn't belong. The most challenging part, and the most difficult to understand, is that it uses love as a basis for this decision to exclude. Love for a pure Unitarianism. You can imagine the despair, the anger, and the confusion that this publication has caused. But make no mistake, the beliefs held in his book are not his alone. There are Unitarian Universalists who share this view, that Unitarian Universalism has strayed from its path and needs to be narrowly redefined. Reverend Eckloff was approached directly by colleagues to speak to them about what he wrote, invited into a conversation, and specifically to make amends with the people in groups he had named as not true UUs. It is my understanding that Reverend Eckloff declined this conversation. So several letters were written and distributed, one from white ministers, which I signed, that said we do not agree with the book's interpretation of our faith, and we stated what we do believe. And if you would like to see that letter or the book, I can give you a link to a free PDF of both of those. But let me summarize by saying what over 500 white UU ministers agreed that we do believe, that the power of we is only truly powerful when we include everyone, and when we make a particular effort to include those people who have been historically and systematically marginalized in our larger communities and our world. The effects of this book were traumatic on these communities at GA, and the pain reverberated throughout the rest of our gathering. so that by the time we got to the end of General Assembly and closing worship, we were grateful that Reverend Marta Valentine was preaching the sermon that day. Reverend Valentine asked us to consider, really consider, what do we mean when we say we? And she described something that I want to try to describe for you. And after my sermon today, I hope you go home and watch her sermon, which is available online. And it's very good. And what she says is so great that it's worth hearing over and over. She said that what we are doing in our faith right now, expanding the we to include everyone, we come up against those places inside of ourselves that resist change. And when we meet with internal resistance, rather than cling to it, we need to get curious and ask ourselves, what's going on? Reverend Valentine says this is like an archaeological dig. And it isn't just white people or straight people or cis people who need to do this, it's everybody. Everyone's work is different, but we all have a part. And we have to be very delicate with this, because when we meet internal resistance to including everyone, we have stumbled upon something important. A sacred site is what she calls it. A sacred site. Now, in the ancient past, when religions and societies were conquering one another, they had a habit of building their sacred sites on top of one another to show dominance. So, for instance, in the Middle East, Jewish temples were built on mosques, and Christian churches were built on Jewish temples, and mosques were built on Christian churches, and round it went. And this is the old way of colonization and imperialism. What we are trying to do is encounter our sacred stories and decide together, as a collective, what should be preserved and what should be dismantled, but always expanding, never making more narrow. This is the work, the delicate work. We do it privately, getting curious in those moments where we resist that expanding definition of we, and we do it in our faith as a community when we are building programs and institutional structures. When we find a sacred site, an old UU song that we love, or a word that we can't seem to stop using, or something that has always been done or said this one way, we acknowledge it, we get our most precise instruments, and we bravely enter to begin the digging. We are learning together how to shepherd a delicate turning. And if we can learn it inside of ourselves, we can learn it in our faith, then we can take what we have learned out into the larger world. The great turning is happening all around us. And in this moment in time, our skills are being called for. And we must be gentle with one another, not timid. We must be brave. We get to be human, close up with one another, holding one another in community as we encounter what we think is sacred and bravely examining it together. This is how we will truly learn to live into the beloved community. We assume that everyone is already here, that this space is already multi-gender, multi-racial, multi-faith, multicultural, multi-ability. And we do our archaeological digs bearing this truth in mind, delicately preserving and rebuilding our sacred sites. And we pay close attention that this time we don't conquer or exclude. Instead, we ask ourselves, who is here? Who has always been here? Who must be heard and included this time? The power of we and this is true in all ecosystems, is that the more diverse we are, the more variety, the more richness of the expression of life, the healthier we are, the stronger we are, and the more we thrive. There was a song at GA, a theme song, that ran through each day and was sung over and over again, and its lyrics went like this. We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap, the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time we lead ourselves into the well. It is time now. And what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we shall learn to lead in love. Let us learn to lead in love, tend to our cup of fellowship, shine our lights brightly, and continue to bravely expand ourselves and build our capacity for community, so that when we say we know who we mean, and each time we mean one more. So here is the poem from earlier. It's by Joy Harjo, who, if you know, is our new poet laureate, the first Native American woman to be the U.S. Poet Laureate. And the title is Perhaps the World Ends Here. The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, we must eat to live. The gifts of earth are brought and prepared, set on the table. So it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that children are given instructions on what it means to be human. We make men at it. We make women. At this table, we gossip, recall enemies and the ghosts of lovers. Our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children. They laugh with us at our poor falling down selves as we put ourselves back together once again at the table. The table has been a house in the rain, an umbrella in the sun. Wars have begun and ended at this table. It is a place to hide in the shadow of terror, a place to celebrate the terrible victory. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. At this table, we sing with joy, with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse. We give thanks. Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. Amen, and blessed be.